Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting. In our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago, today we're looking back at the hot comics from April 29th, 2022. I'm recording this on October 28th, 2022, a little later this week than getting it done. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is actually relevant because the market is always changing. As always, we're also looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom and Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Each week they put out a list of 10 hot or trending comics that are kind of moving in the market. We look back at those 6 months later to see which ones stayed hot, which ones were good investments at the time, which ones you should have just been patient on, which ones were terrible investments. To try to understand better what we should be chasing in the market when it's hot and what we should be being patient on. We got 18 books sort of to talk about this week. We'll get the one oddball out of the way right off the bat. And our first thing we're going to talk about is Neil Adams' Signature Series. They put this on the list. I think CBSI put this on their list as basically, this was Neil had just passed and there was a ton of people chasing Neil Adams' Signature Series books. Back then, I don't really have values here because depending on the book, obviously that affected the value as well. But anything that was his signature was just selling really rapidly and for premiums. Since then, basically, it's slowed down. This is always what happens when a famous person or artist passes away. As their stuff goes, everybody wants some of their memorabilia, and then it doesn't go away. Like the interest in their memorabilia doesn't go away, and it usually doesn't drop all the way back to what it was before. But it definitely slows down. Like we're down to like less than a sale of a Signature Series book a day in October, which is still a lot, but not nearly what it was back then. Next, we're going to move into the actual books that are more along our usual type. And we're going to start with covers. First up is The Secret History of the War on Weed, #1. We talked about a different cover of this book last week. This is the Bored Ape variant. I'll be perfectly clear, I've never understood this whole Bored Ape thing. I know it has to do with NFTs and everything else, but never quite gotten it. But this one was limited to 500, and this was going for $350 to $400 out the gate. People were going crazy for this thing. Now it's a $50 to $80 book. I kid you not. That is the epitome of a dumpster fire. Definitely were smart if you didn't chase this one. Oh my gosh, that's one of the more dramatic ones we see in 6 months. That is an 80% drop in value at minimum. Just terrible investment if you were chasing this one. Next, we have Spider-Gwen, Gwenverse #1, the Torrin Clark Comics Pro variant. Raw copies of this were going for 100 plus back then. Thought this would be kind of an I'll be back, we'll see if anything comes of these other Spider-Gwen characters. We don't even get very many of them in this first issue. But this one is still going for $150 to $300. People really like this cover. 9.8 though only went for $255. It's only one sale, but there was actually a couple of raw sales that were higher than that, which don't make a lot of sense, but that's where we're at. But overall, this has been up in straight cash. People are still chasing this cover and really liking it. So, I go back to my original thoughts on that, which was it's a good one, but not a great Gwen cover. But apparently I am wrong because people think it's a great Gwen cover. Next, we have Spider-Gwen, Gwenverse #1, the Mike Mayhew WonderCon variant, limited to 1,000. This one was going for 65, which isn't really that hot for a con variant right out the gate. Now it's a $15 to $60 book, so wide range on these. But one 9.8 sale for like a little over $100. But yeah, this turned into a bit of a trap. Most of the sales are in the 30ish, 20ish range, with just a couple sales pushing up towards 60. But yeah, this has definitely turned into a bit of a trap. So unlike the other Gwen cover, this one did not hold nearly as well. With that, we got still a couple more covers. We got Something is Killing the Children, #22, the Jenny Frison 1 per store. So all of these Frisons, people tend to love them. This is another one of those 1 per stores. It was going for 30 to 40. Reminder, typically a $30 to $40 1 per store 1 per stores are typically function a lot like a 1 for 25. So it was barely going over what would be a 1 for 25 ratio. And that usually means it's going to end up below $25. In this case, it's a $10 to $30 book. Most of the sales around 20. Definitely a down and an I'll be back, and a book that would be worth being patient on. So just a reminder, usually 1 per stores work out to about a 1 in 25. It's just, they usually perform very similar. Next, we have our last cover is Daredevil #1 from 2019. This Scotty Young variant was getting some momentum in the market. Raw copy, it's been a slow climb on this one, but it was jumping up. Raw copies were up to $50, 9.8 hitting 175. Only 2 recent sales of this. There's not a lot of them out there. I think that's why it's slowly been climbing, but only 2 recent sales, $45 and $50 for raw copies. So we're going to call this kind of a steady I'll be back. You could do a little better. There's a few out there. You didn't necessarily have to chase. I mean, you could argue this maybe should be steady, worth it, but it's right in that range of right around the value that it was. Next, we have we're going to move into Sony movie news and spec. We have Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man #6. The first appearance of El Muerto, and there were rumors that they were going to get Bad Bunny to make an El Muerto movie, and Sony's really using their rights to the Spider-Man characters to do El Muerto. Anyway, raw copies back then jumped all the way up to $75 to $100 for this character, which just seemed crazy to me, and that just turned into that. It's now a $20 to $50 book. 9.8 still, though, will go for over $300, $350 in that range. I call this a dumpster fire. It's borderline dumpster fire, but it's kind of more in the upper end of the trap zone, and really on what the values came down. But yeah, there's no necessarily new news on this. I still don't understand. There's Silk and all these other, and Black Cat, and like all these other Spider-Man related characters that you can make movies with, and they're going with El Muerto. Okay, next we have Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man #7. First appearance of El Diablo, which is the only villain related to El Muerto, so that's why people were chasing this book. And also second appearance of El Muerto. Raw copies were $15 back then. Now it's $5 to $15. Still call this a trap because most of them are on the 5 side of things. But yeah, this is definitely not a book people are really chasing. We'll note that most of the sales of both of these books are combined people selling both of them, because they're the only 2 appearances of El Muerto, and yet we're going to get a movie of him. Okay, next we get Tales of the Jedi #1. And this hit the list because the show, there was an announcement that we got news that there was a show coming with this title. What I worried about then was I was like, this could literally be anything and have nothing to do with the comic book. Well, the show came out literally this week, and it had nothing to do with the comic book. They just used the Tales of the Jedi to tell other Jedi stories of Jedi characters that hadn't been told before, which is kind of what I thought they would do. And they focused on characters that they'd been using and not necessarily these random characters that were in this comic book. So yeah, back then it was a $25 book, 9.8 going for $250. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. There are still some Star Wars firsts in here, so it didn't completely crash, but definitely turned into a trap. 9.8 only cost you $90 to $100 on this one. Definitely a book that has not held. I feel like really if we're going to go in the past, we're mostly going to get Disney's Star Wars Jedi and not necessarily some of these old legends, but you never know. Next, we're going to jump into MCU stuff and the rest of the list. So the last 9 books are all MCU related. First up is Spawn #9, the first appearance of Angela. Obviously, Angela's got a complicated history. Like, there was a fight over her rights. Neil Gaiman eventually sold her to Marvel. And she's Thor's sister. So people thought she might show up in Love and Thunder. She did not. But back then, 9.8 of this book were up to $175 to $200. Plus, that is the direct version. We are not talking about the newsstand here. Now raw copies are $5 to $25. 9.8 only costs you $125, $150. So this is an I'll be back. Still a character a lot of people like and love, but there's a lot of these out there, and we've no indication we're getting Angela anytime soon. Next, we get Incredible Hercules #120. This is the first appearance of Clyburn, the Skrull God. I have no idea if I pronounced that right. But yeah, this has to do with Secret Wars and Secret Invasion coming and all this kind of stuff. $10 to $15 back then, $5 to $15 now. Definitely a down, and I'll be back. We're getting closer to Secret Invasion, but it's not coming till the spring. So yeah, we have no idea which Skrulls we're going to get or anything like that. So, and even if we get them, look at the values of some of the other side or less important characters in some of these other shows and movies that have come and gone, and that'll tell you whether or not you should chase this one. Next, we have Moon Knight, #1. This is basically the storyline that sort of inspired episodes 4 and 5 of the Moon Knight show. So people were jumping on this. Story inspirations rarely hold when you chase them. Back then, this jumped up to a $30 book when they went into the insane asylum. 9.8 was going for $135. Now it's a $15 to $30 book. So occasionally still going that high. Most of the sales are lower, more in the 15 to 20 range. 9.8 is only 50 to 80. Definitely borderline I'll be back trap, but definitely I put it on the, because of so many of the sales were on the lower end, I put it in the trap category. But yeah, definitely a book that moved away from the show, which got very mixed reviews, but and yeah, the storyline doesn't really amount to much after that. Next, we have Darkhawk #1. First appearance of Darkhawk. James Gunn, basically, who's now headed to DC, made a comment about that he was almost in Guardians 2. We'll see if he shows up in Guardians 3, but with James Gunn walking away, who knows what we're going to get there, as he's moving over to DC to help become their Kevin Feige, basically. Back then, caused this book to jump up $20 for raw copies. 9.8 hit 300. Now it's still a $10 to $30 book. That wasn't a huge jump back then. It was basically a $20 book even before. It was just lots of sales. 10 to 30 on the raw side. 9.8, 150 to 250. So it's an I'll be back. It's backed up a little bit, but not much. This is pretty much kind of where Darkhawk is set where it is now. So not a huge down from where, not hugely up when it jumped up and not hugely back down. Next, we have Superior Iron Man #1. First appearance of Superior Iron Man. And this was on the list despite the fact that, like, by this point we pretty much knew he wasn't gonna appear, but people were still chasing. Actually, was the movie out at this point? I think this was even post-movie. I don't know. This might have still been post-movie, but this book was, or maybe right before the movie. I forget when Multiverse of Madness came out now. Was it 1st of May or was it before then? Not sure. But anyway, Superior Iron Man, people were still specking on that back then. $20 to $40. A 9.8 was $2 to $250. Now it's a $15 to $35 book. 9.8, $125, $150. So borderline trap on the 9.8 side. Just an I'll be back on the raw side. And yeah, so people were chasing this, thinking we might get that whole Tom Cruise Superior Iron Man thing. We didn't get any of that. So, and I really don't expect us to ever get a Tom Cruise Iron Man, but who knows? They did like to do some of these little side stuff. So next we have New Avengers #7, the first appearance of the Illuminati. We did get the Illuminati or a version of them in Multiverse of Madness. Back then this book was going for $90 on the raw side. 9.8 was up to $450, which was still, I think, down a little bit from the peak when the trailer hit. Now it's a $15 to $25 book. 9.8 will cost you $1 to $125. That's a dumpster fire. So when you think about specking on some of these Marvel books, you've got to know when to get out. This is a huge drop back. This is the same thing that we saw with the Thor books. This version of the Illuminati didn't amount to anything. I don't know if we'll ever get another version or not. And yeah, this book has crashed hard if you were chasing this between the trailer and the movie. If you bought it then, that was not the time to buy. Last 3 books all relate to one of those characters that were introduced there. So I guess the movie had just come out, or was just about to come out, I think, at this point. And we got Captain Carter #1, the first appearance of Captain Carter, technically, I think, in comics. I know there's like different versions and there's arguments here, but anyway. And this is the cover A. It was going for $10 to $15 because we knew we were getting her, and we got her in a trailer or a spot right before the movie came out. Raw copies now are $5 to $15. 9.8 only $40 to $70. So this is still a pretty affordable book. I thought it was worth it at $10 to $15. Didn't quite make that. It was more of an I'll be back because you can definitely get it for under $10. So we'll see if they bring Haley Atwell back again. I would be all for it, but I don't know if we'll get it. So we will see. And next we have Captain Carter #1, the animation 1 in 25. Back then this 1 in 25 jumped all the way up to, this was the book that you wanted for Captain Carter. It jumped all the way up to $250 to $300. 9.8 hit $550. Now it's an $80 to $125 book. You're talking a little over 50, 60% drop. 9.82 to 300. So this is another borderline dumpster fire, but definitely a trap. As this book is come plummeting down, as again we've moved away from her appearance. We will see if we get any more. Last but not least, we get Exiles number 3. This is the first appearance of Peggy Carter as Captain America. So this is a version where she becomes Captain America, which never quite made sense because she was British. But anyway, that was they originally did it. They turned her into Captain America. Raw copies were $100. Back then. Now a raw copy will cost you $40 to $80. Again, we've moved away from the whole Peggy Carter thing at the moment. 9.82 to $350. It's another book that has turned into a trap from the heights around the movie. This is super common with these Marvel books. You should remember it going forward when you make your decisions to buy. So that is this week's list. We had 18 books. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.